My battery doesn't die. Okay, so one more time, the proposition today is that the U.S. should ban the use of combat drones in combat. The debates start this way, where you get a few minutes to explain any background information you might feel is relevant, or define any terms that might help us. So does either side have anything they want to catch us up to speed on, or define anything?
Yeah, there are multiple drones being used right now. They can be used for surveillance and for striking, and the ones that we're specifically talking about is striking drones, not surveillance.
So in essence, you're okay with surveillance drones in combat. You don't want drones that have guns or bombs.
Yeah.
Great.
And specifically, those combat drones are the UAVs, unmanned aerial vehicles. The ones that we're going to be referring to are the Army's MQ-1C Gray Eagle and the MQ-9 Reaper, and we'll also be talking about the PTSD, the post-traumatic stress disorder that it causes.
So there's two different style of combat drones are referred to as the Eagle and the Reaper, and then of course PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. Okay. Any other history or definitions that either side would like to share, so that we might be better able to understand what you guys are talking about?
Yeah, I wanted to find F-35 fighter jet.
Okay.
It's pretty much just a typical jet that is mainly used by the United States. That's like their choice of jet that they mainly use.
And again, that would be an actual manned aircraft with
Yes.
a pilot in it, right? Okay. And of course, when we're talking about drones, we mean unmanned aircraft, or they don't have a pilot in them, I should say. Okay. Anything else? Oh wait, I do need someone to be the turn. Someone be the turn. Okay. Right in the front, that'll work. Do you remember what the times are? 5, 2, and 2. Okay, so what you'll do though is in the constructive speeches, that's when they get 5. When they get to 3 minutes, I'll have you hold your 3 fingers up like this, above your head, right? And then 4, and then when it's 4.5 minutes, that's the 30-second sign, right? If they get to 5 minutes in the constructives, what do you say? Time, exactly. The 2 minutes, you show them 1 minute, and then 30 seconds, and then time if they get to it. And that's both for cross-examinations and rebuttals. Okay? Any questions by anybody else before we get going? Okay, please double check your phones are on silent, preferably off and away. And then if you would write down their times, the best way I would say is they're going to have, I have them say their name the very first time. And they do kind of go back and forth. So Ted's going to do his constructive. And in about 2 speeches, then he's going to be cross-examining. So you'll write his next time just horizontally fluid. Does that make sense? Okay. Okay, so I just said you were going to say your name, so say it when you're ready. Start talking, and he'll start timing.
All right, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Ted Laura, and again, our proposition is on the United States should ban the use of combat drones. And again, I define the terms, the Army MQ-1C Gray Eagle and the MQ-9 Reapers, the 2 drones that we'll mainly be speaking about, and the PTSD. And a few of our claims are the cause of PSD, we're hurting foreign relations, we're increasing anti-American sentiment, and they're not as effective as humans. And my first claim is the cost, because they're pretty expensive. The cheapest one is about $5 million, and the more advanced one is they run up to $14 million per drone. And according to Oleg, an award-winning journalist, an authority of reality check session, because we were talking about, you know, it's cheaper to put a foot soldier on the ground than it is to produce these combat drones, because it only takes roughly 45,000 to train 1 Marine. And according to the Belfer Center of Science and our International Affairs, stated in May 2015, the Pentagon operates an estimated 7,000 drones. So when you times those numbers of how much it costs to produce these drones, you know, the numbers get pretty extreme, they get pretty high. And if we were to stop these drone programs, we could use that money elsewhere. And another example of that was by Professor Salzberg of the Biomedical Engineering and Computer Science and Biostatistics at the Johns Hopkins University. He stated if the Defense Department ended the Global Hawk Drone program in over a 4-year period, the U.S. could save $205 billion. And when we save that money, we could be using that for other institutions as the National Institution for Health to try to help cure cancer. And we could also better equip our foot soldiers on the ground to do their job better. And another reason is the PTSD, because according to Tobin, a Harvard Law School researcher of more disengagement in the military drone operations, research conducted showed that the mental change in unmanned aerial pilots was just as severe as foot soldiers, because the pilots who are flying these drones, you know, that they still have to watch all the footage, they still see the deaths, and they're still the ones pulling the trigger. Foot soldiers, you know, it's kind of a messed up situation, because, you know, they're always gonna be in that type of situation when they need to be, because it's war. You know, we can't, unless we can figure out a way to stop war, there's always gonna be, you know, these stressful situations for our men of our country and our women. And like I said, the pilots of these unmanned drones, they're still exposed to all this, and their PTSD is just as severe as any foot soldier on the ground, even though they might not be in the combat areas. And another reason is us using these drones. They're going into friendly territory that some of these other countries they're getting pretty mad, and it's hurting our foreign relations through civilian casualties, because they think they're going after, you know, a target when they don't get the right information, and they blow that target up. They're killing innocent civilians instead of getting their target. And according to the Drone Strike Blurring the Laws of War articles written in February 2013 by Olivia Ward, she was 13 years experience as a foreign correspondent, states that a group of village tribal leaders in northern Pakistan gathered for a meeting regarding mining dispute. Thinking they were safe, they were wrong, because they were suddenly bombed by an unmanned drone. And out of the 50 present, only 4 related to the Taliban were killed. The other 46 were all civilians. And that is hurting our trust with our foreign partners. Because when we're over there on the ground, it is easier for us to gather, you know, intelligence when we build that foreign relation and build that trust with the civilians and the other people over in those other countries. But now that we're going across the borders and we're doing these unmanned aerial strikes, they're not trusted as much, and it's causing, you know, terrorists or causing people to go over to ISIS or whatever terrorist groups that are forming over there.
Time. Okay, so now, negative number 2, you get 2 minutes to cross-examine. So Tim, you stay up there though. Okay.
Dennis?
Yes.
Okay, in your article, The Army of One Carries a High Price by Diana Orland. Are you aware that she is a real estate correspondent for CNBC? And how
Yes.
does that make her credible?
I was aware of that, and because I looked through multiple articles, and that number seemed to be the same one that was present when I found that information. So
So
I
she
should-
did her research?
yeah,
about
she
it?
did quite a bit of research on it, and I seen that, like I said, the information kind of correlated with the other research that I found.
Because I've done a lot of research the last 2 weeks too.
Mhm.
Okay, another one. You mentioned that Pentagons operate 7,000 drones. Is that only combat drones?
There's probably a lot more than just the combat drone, and even then, some of the information that I found, they wasn't really disclosing the actual amount of how many that they were really using out there, and that was just the CIA alone. So
Yeah.
how many more of the U.S. and the military using?
It's true. I did some investigating on that and found that only approximately 678 of those are actually combat drones.
Mhm.
The rest are these tiny little surveillance
Mhm.
drones that can fit in your backpack.
Yeah.
So really, 7,000 drones, and you're equating it to cost, kind of a big difference between 678. Also, in your article, you mentioned that the defense can save $205 billion by not doing those off drills, is that what it was called?
Yeah.
Okay, so when I read through that article, I also noticed that it wasn't 205 billion, it was 2.5 billion.
2.5 billion.
That's a big difference. Okay?
You gotta ask a question though for the next one.
Okay. Do you know if, hi? Okay.
So, for future, highlight those things when you have constructive, ask you questions to respond to in question across things, okay? All right, negative number one, you get your first constructive opportunity, you get 5 minutes to speak on the negative side. Tell us your name though before you begin, and then once you start talking, then start your time.
Morning, everyone. My name is Gonzalo Torres, and as mentioned earlier, the proposition is that the U.S. should ban the use of combat drones in combat. Any way we look at it, war is terrible and comes with great costs. Through technology, the U.S. strives to develop tools to minimize these losses. Drones are an example of one of these tools. The uses of combat drones will save money, decrease civilian fatalities, save U.S. lives, and improve quality of life. All of this is possible only if the U.S. stays at the forefront of drone technology. My first claim, drones are a lot cheaper compared to airplanes or jets. According to an article in PGAAeroweb.com published in May 28, 2015 by J. Casper Ostegard, who is an aerospace analyst, mentioned that the MQ-9 Reaper cost $13.77 million each. The MQ-9 Reaper was used in Afghanistan. It's a combat drone, and it was used in Afghanistan against terrorist groups. According to a video on LockheedMartin.com, which is a company who designs, builds, and tests the F-35 fighter jet, which is a typical jet that is used by the U.S., mentioned that as of February 2015, the total amount of these F-35s owned by the U.S. is 2,443. Each one of these jets costs around $337 million each. So if you compare the drone price at $13.77 million and the fighter jet at $337 million, it's a big price difference. And another thing, drones fly themselves and require less training, which is also less money spent. According to the Department of Defense budget of 2015, they will spend $13.8 billion on manned combat aircrafts. $2.4 billion will be spent on unmanned aerial vehicles. That's an $11.4 billion difference. So again, these numbers don't lie. This is a big price difference if you compare combat drones to manned aerial vehicles. My second claim is drones kill fewer civilians as a percentage of total fatalities. An article in Slate.com published in February 19, 2013 by William Sailton stated that the United Nations Protection of Civilians in Armed Conflict annual report mentioned that the civilian casualties from aerial attacks fell 42% because drones were used more. So the more we use drones and the less we use combat manned airstrikes, lives are being saved. According to the United Nations report from 2011 to 2012, the increased use of drones and decreased use of manned airstrikes led to 109 lives, less civilian deaths. So again, the use of drones is helping with less civilian deaths. In Vietnam, aerial bombing killed more than 50,000 civilians. Civilian casualties do rarely occur during planned airstrikes, but high civilian loss of life during airstrikes has almost occurred during rapid response strikes. So what I'm trying to get at here is that civilian deaths occur with drones also, but more deaths occur with fighter jets. And drones can overcome some of these problems. Drones can fly. They can fly low without the fear of the pilot losing their life. Drones can, since they can fly low to the ground, they can study their target carefully instead of just reacting in the heat of the moment, and which will also save lives, civilian lives. And drones kill a lower level of civilians to combatants than we've seen in a recent war. So when troops are sent, fighting breaks out, and the longer fighting goes on, the more innocent people die. the use of combat drones should not be banned because the cost of a drone is about $323 million cheaper than a typical fighter jet of choice by the U.S. Another reason combat drones should not be banned is because drones kill fewer civilians than manned aerial strikes. Thank you, I relinquish my time.
Okay, so hang out up there. Affirmative number one, that's Ted. Again, you get 2 minutes to cross-examine.
Okay, you stated that you can study your target carefully with drones without striking in the heat of the moment. So there must be some planning, stalking, and better awareness of these civilians nearby. So how do civilians still manage to get killed with such precision? For example, the incident where 4 out of 50 were killed.
4 out of 50, I didn't remember mentioning. Was that my first source, or which source was that I said 4 out of 50?
Yeah, like when I talk about my source, it's just how, because because the drones are only just as efficient as the information they get, so how they more efficient in their precision.
Well, again, like in my, my source, the United Nations Protecting the Civilians in Armed Conflict annual report, they mentioned that the increased use of drones and decreased use of manned airstrikes led to 109 less civilian deaths. And the United Nations seems like a pretty good, credible source. I don't know how I would be flawed in that.
Yeah,
in that
understandable.
research.
And if each one of these drones cost almost 14 million, where would that money be coming from, especially if we start producing mass amounts of them?
Well, I think mainly it would be coming from us, of course, but I think every penny that's being used for drones is worth the money, because our soldiers are being protected and they're not risking their lives and going into the field when they could. There's a bunch of different ways that they can die, and if we're not sending soldiers and we're just sending drones, it's worth every life that we're saving, that we're not risking.
Thank you, gentlemen. Then the the affirmative has their final 5-minute opportunity to do constructive.
Good morning, my name is Modesto Ramos, and like my partner Ted was saying, drones, they're expensive, they don't really curb the rate of PTSD, and apart from that, they're hurting our foreign relations. So really what that does is when drones, when they kill innocent civilians or they pass into other territories, especially by friendly allies, all that does is simply create hate, mistrust, and fuels anti-American sentiment, which that of course breaks down our foreign relations. According to the British Bureau of Investigative Journalism, which is an organization that pursues research, investigations, and reportings, and they also have ties to the New York Times, in 2013 they examined government, military, and intelligence officials' reports. And they found that between 2004 to 2012, some 2,500 to 3,300 people were killed due to drone strikes. Out of those, 470 to around about 880 were civilians. And also keep in mind that as more civilians are being accidentally killed by drones, and that includes mostly in Yemen or even North Africa, it simply makes America look bad. So sure, we're not there to make the most peaceful resolutions in our attempt to hunt down terrorists, but then again, that doesn't justify the killing of innocent civilians in the pursuit of terrorists. And that brings me to my next reason, that killing civilians, or accidentally killing civilians, what it usually leads to is increased anti-American sentiment, which that in turn produces a greater threat to our soldiers on the ground. According to Ken Good, who's the managing director of the National Security Program Against Terrorism, he states that the reliance on combat drones and their use, which results in accidental killing of civilians, drives more recruits into the Al-Qaeda and the Taliban factions. Terrorist organizations, what they like to use is they like to use civilian casualties as a form of propaganda to help recruit people to fight against the United States. So is that really what we eventually want? Is for these terrorist organizations to simply gain influence and expand, for example, ISIS, which loves to use propaganda to simply help gain support from people in nations such as the United States and get extremists. And also another reason, drones are simply not as effective as humans. According to Why Drones Fail When Tactics Drive Strategy, which was an article written in July 2013 by Audrey Kurth, who was the director of Core Course on War and Statecraft at the United States National War College in Washington, D.C., and was in charge of a team of more than 30 senior military faculty, simply states that humans, they're far more effective because you can actually collect intelligence, you can capture terrorists to be interrogated, which that in turn means that you can get information. So combat drones, they can't do that. They just blow everything up. So, and keep in mind that even the death of Osama bin Laden was brought on by humans, not drones. So, and the raid, of course, resulted in a treasure load of information. And a drone, if it would have been a drone, it would have just simply blown everything up. Sure, he would have been dead, but what else could you get out of it? You can't get information, you can't you can't interrogate terrorists to get more information, which then in turn gives you pretty much insights into planned attacks or even key leaders or even weapons cache. So using humans, they're far more effective than combat drones. So drones, they're expensive, they don't really curb PTSD rates, they're hurting our foreign relations, and it's simply not as effective as a human. And that's why I'm asking you to accept our proposition to stop the use of combat drones in combat. Thank you. And I relinquish my time.
Okay, hang out up there for a couple more minutes. Negative number one, that's Gonzalo. You have 2 minutes to cross-examine.
Okay, according to your source, Why Drones Fail, it states that there is no conclusive evidence that can prove whether drone strikes create more enemies. How did you come up with the conclusion that there is a greater threat to our soldiers on the ground?
Well, it's pretty simple because in that case, if sure there's not no conclusive evidence that, that one, for example, that, what was it? That, okay.
So are you more credible than this source, than the one you used that states that,
Well, what you can see is the correlation between the simple fact that it's a drone and that fact that it kills civilians. What it does in that case is it gets people angry. There have been protests in Pakistan regarding drone strikes. And also keep in mind, going in that case, the correlation that you guys made between what was it, drone strikes and the fact that it decreases civilian casualties, that was also a correlation. There could be other variables in play.
okay, how are humans more effective than combat drones? If your source failed to prove that, from your source says that, it mentions that combat drones cut Al-Qaeda members by 75% with only maybe 4 key members remaining, and it's lowered the overall level of violence. How did this prove the foot soldiers are more effective if your source says it itself?
Well, the simple fact is, if you take out key leaders, what that does is it creates a power vacuum, especially in the Middle East where people are trying to form new governments.
And they were taken out by combat drones. So how
It
it
creates a power vacuum, which then in turn leads
according
all these
to
smaller factions.
according to you or the source?
All the articles I've read regarding this. If I
Because
tried to
this-
get information from every single article, man, this would be like an hour-long debate.
Okay, so your source failed to confirm that, so would you think that it's okay to cross this source out? Because it doesn't mention that, that soldiers are more effective.
Yeah, it's said that it was.
Time. Okay, we get one more constructive speech. Remember, anytime questions are asked and you want to clarify them later or you want to respond more than you always can. So keep those things in mind, even though there's no more constructive or affirmative, you have a rebuttal. Okay, final constructive speech from the negative. Emily, you get 5 minutes.
My name is Emily, and according to our research, drones will save money, decrease civilian fatalities. In addition to this, drones make U.S. military personnel safer, and quite frankly, the United States cannot risk falling behind the rest of the world when it comes to developing drone technology. First off, drones make U.S. military personnel safer. When we put soldiers on the ground, this comes with a great risk. To name a few, there are fight or fights with surrounding tribal communities, landmines, explosive devices, suicide bombers, snipers, dangerous weather conditions, and harsh environments. The use of drones will dramatically reduce these risks. When we use drones, pilots leave their homes and within a few minutes arrive at work. I interviewed my brother Andrew Tree, who has worked for the military for the last 15 years as the chief engineer, data range division. Andrew told me that he had firsthand knowledge that drone pilots are able to get up and go to the bathroom, stretch their legs, eat, and talk to their families while another pilot takes over. And most important, these pilots get to return home to their families, and troops on the ground do not have this luxury. Kenneth Anderson, who is a professional of international law, and Mr. Tree both stated that drone pilots do not make the decision to strike. A committee of military specialists makes this decision, and there is military lawyers always present. The drone pilot is just a pilot following the commands. The military also staffs a senior master sergeant who keeps an eye on the young crew for signs of stress. As my opponents have mentioned, that drones pilots are exposed to violence, which does not minimize PTSD, which is true. They do suffer from a form of PTSD, but there's, let me show you the math here. So according to the Guardian.com, they said that there are 550 drone pilots. And according to CNN, a table of military troops, I took a list of only the Army and the Marines, which are foot soldiers, and there are approximately 650,000 soldiers. And this does not include any soldiers stationed in any other countries. So here you have 65,000 compared to 550 who are exposed to PTSD. It's clear that PTSD issues for drone pilots is a minor one in comparison. The U.S. cannot risk in falling behind the rest of the world in the development of technology. Mr. Singer, who is the director of the 21st Century Secretary of Intelligence, stated in an article in the Washington Times in 2013, stated, drones are inexpensive, easy to maintain, and most important, eliminate risk to human pilots. They are now the wish list of many nations. There are as many as 87 nations that possess some type of drones. 26 of these nations have either purchased or developed drone equipment the size of the MQ-1 Reaper. China is wrapping up their production of drones and apparent to catch up to the United States and Israel. China is developing a variety of mid-size, high-altitude, long-endurance drones for surveillance and strike. As I sat here and listened to our opponents talk about why we should ban the use of drones, I did not hear a plan to put a policy in place. But I do see lots of errors and there are reasons why to ban drones. First off, they said it will save money. Let me remind you, this article was written by a real estate agent. Second claim, drones do not curb PTSD. Again, not another credible source, and the numbers speak for themselves. Second claim, third claim, hurting foreign relations through civilian casualties. In their own article states, there is no conclusive evidence that can prove whether drone strikes create more enemies. Their own article said that. So, quite frankly, the United States has never been popular, but drones has not made it worse. Their last claim is that drones are not as effective as humans. We can all agree that Navy SEALs are, excuse my French, but badasses. In the effort to get bin Laden, it took 10 years. But with drones, within less than 4 years, we've taken out 75% of their Al-Qaeda members. So look, drones, they save money, they decrease civilian lives, they save American lives, and keep America in the forefront of technology. You've heard the flaws in my opponents, and I'm asking you to reject the proposition to the use of combat drones during combat. I relinquish my.
Okay, hang out there for a minute. One more cross-examination session, that is from, get 2 minutes, sir.
Okay, so you said that you had a personal interview with a civilian who works with the military. How could a civilian speak for all military personnel?
He doesn't speak for all military, but he has firsthand account and works for the military. He can gather information that we couldn't necessarily gather.
But keep in mind that there are multiple branches in the military. There's the Marine Corps, the Army, Coast Guard, there's the Navy, the Air Force.
Yes, but we were focusing on foot soldiers, correct?
And drones.
And drones, which he develops. I know firsthand that he actually works on developing drones.
So if he's speaking for foot soldiers, claiming that they're safer, is he part of the infantry?
No, but according to your source, one of your sources, you said 2,500 civilians were killed in the attack. and that 470 of them were innocent civilians. And this is over an 8-year period. So if you were to break that down, that's only 3 civilians dying a year. And that's coming from your own source. And 29 terrorists being killed by drones.
Okay, you also mentioned that the drones will eliminate all risks of U.S. troops. So what you're saying is that the only way to simply avoid such risks is to not deploy soldiers. So you're suggesting that we fight and counterterrorism war solely with the drones.
No, I didn't say that actually.
You say that's the only possible way you could eliminate all risks to
No.
U.S. troops, keeping them away from sniper fire.
I said the use of drones would dramatically reduce these risks, not all risks. In an old outline, I might have said that, but I said reduce these risks.
Okay. And if the U.S. should not fall behind in the production of drones, and we should keep up with China, another superpower. So, do we actually have the budget to be keeping up with such a budget?
Of course we do, because if we use more drones, then we're not putting as many of these fighter pilot jets, which cost millions of dollars. We're not using them as much, so we can use the money from there.
So would you say that a F-30?
Okay, so, there's intermission, you're gonna get at least 8 minutes, but you both need to leave the room. If you wanna use the bathroom, you guys can, otherwise, there's like 3 or 4 private piano practice rooms in there, which have a couple chairs and a little desk in them. And when you close them, they're virtually soundproof, you guys wouldn't necessarily be able to hear the person. Skip one if you want. So please leave the room, and we'll give you a 2-minute warning, as to when you have to wrap up your thoughts. When we come back, negative speaks first.